Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I have a wonderful guest today for the podcast, Granddaughter Crow, a prolific and wonderful writer and medicine woman. Joy Granddaughter Crow has received a BS in business management, as well as a BS in business administration, an MBA, and a doctorate in leadership. She has written several wonderful books. We're going to talk about that. She's has several years of experience in corporate America, working for an international company, and additional time working for government. She has worked as a college professor. She is here to share and serve under the name of Granddaughter Crow. Internationally recognized as a medicine woman, Granddaughter Crow was born an empath and medium. She comes from a long lineage of spiritual leaders and esoteric wisdom, raised by spiritual leaders as a child. She was fashioned and trained to serve the people through ministry. She is a member of the Navajo Nation. Her father, and also has a Dutch heritage, her mother. Granddaughter Crow provides a sense of integration through life experience. In particular, I just got done reading Granddaughter Crow's new book, Belief Being Beyond, as well as her wonderful book, Wisdom of the Natural World. And I'm totally recommending everybody read these books. Granddaughter Crow has some very fascinating insights that came to me as I was reading this stuff, and they're unique reads. The most recent book, which I believe is coming out yesterday, right? It just came out.
Yeah, or actually, it's coming out the beginning of June. So, but I got my copy. So yeah,
right. By the time the interview comes out, it'll be when the book comes out. So, it's a unique book because the way it's structured, I just found it fascinating. It's talking about within the structure of a day, awakening, enlightenment, being, becoming, using tarot arcana. Super fascinating way to write this book, and I got a lot out of it. It's very different than what you'd expect from a traditional book like this. And then Wisdom of the Natural World really had some unique, powerful exercises, brought me back to a connection to nature, and I could see the things around me in a more spiritual sense, like trees and mountains and plants, and it helped me connect to the mother. So I mean, there's so much stuff here. I just want to welcome you to the Reality Revolution. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for inviting me onto your show, as well as everything that you do on screen for all the listeners and behind the scenes. Just want to give a call out because I know that there's a lot that you put into all of these. Wanted to say hello to his listeners. And I listened to quite a few of your different podcasts, very interesting, mind expanding, exploring the unknown. And it's just really an honor for me to be here. And thank you for, talking about my book. It is very, very different. But then again, aren't we all, original thoughts. And I think that one of the things that I try to do within my authorship is to speak with the person who's sitting there reading it. I want to talk directly to them. So I have more of a dialogue. And sometimes, I go off on, oh, and by the way, here's this interesting scientific fact. But what I try to do is stir up whatever it is that is right on the brink of being stirred up within each individual reader. So they might get touched by the tarot, they might get touched by the wisdom within the world, they can get touched by quite a few different things. But within this book, what I wanted to do is help us to understand that we are more similar than we are different. We all experience the mourning, and that feeling, when you embody what it feels like to wake up, like literally wake up, maybe have a cup of coffee, stretch, sit in the sunlight. That sensation is to the body what an enlightenment or an awakening is to the mind and to the spirit and to the heart. So it helps us to embody and gives us really good definition around that. That's why I utilize, a lot of esoteric stuff. Let's put it in the body. Let's see what it feels like as we move forward. So
So you tell a little bit about your story in the book about growing up, and it was as a medicine woman, the way you write, I was surprised to see that you were raised in a Christian household,
Yeah.
in a strict Christian household, brought up to be a minister, and even kind of told, don't question this.
Yep.
You're not allowed to question this, and to be programmed against questioning something I'm sure deprogramming yourself from that has been part of your journey. So tell me a little more about that, how you came from that Christian household to this expansive view of the universe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, just in short, my mother and father, my father, full-blooded Navajo Indian, or Native American First Nation, and my mother, full-blood Dutch. How did these two people get together? They got together through seminary school. So they both went to go become a reverend of sorts. They got together and they decided to be missionaries to bring Christianized thinking to the Navajo. And so out of the three kids, I was the one that they figured would carry on this cloak. I was so ingrained, it was so ingrained within me to not question authority, to not question the elders, do not question the Bible, do not question God, do not question. Children are to be seen and not heard. And that I sat with that until I was about 15 years old. And I started asking questions. Maybe that was my soul or spirit coming through, like, why can't I ask a question? Oh my God, when I started saying things like that, they were like, oh, we need to get her out of the secular public schools. We need to put her back into the Christianized schools, and the thinking, don't ask questions. So what I did was I just kept going. It did lead to them separating themselves from me and my current life. They still are very, very devout, but it helped me to start thinking, like, how is it possible that a belief system that is left unquestioned would constitute two people in the position of spiritual leadership and authority to disregard their youngest daughter? And as hard as that sounds, I mean, but doing a lot of healing around that. And obviously with the book, I'm healed enough to like talk about to the world, but it's like, wow, if our belief systems are so much that we cast out our children, okay, that makes sense. Why we go to war, why we do this. So my mind is, I guess astrology speaking, for those who understand astrology, my sun sign is in the 9th house, which is the house of mental expansion. So if there's anything, how I figure that to be is, if there's one thing that I look for in the world, it's to expand the mind, to expand the consciousness. And then I start looking around at like other types of communities, whether it's a race beyond religion, whether it's race, whether it's sexual orientation, and the persecution that comes down to them when they're not allowed to question or think outside the box. So it's been pretty much a lifelong mission for me to ask questions and to encourage others to ask questions, because I will not serve any belief system that does not let me question it. Because if it lets me question it, then it has nothing to hide.
Exactly.
Or it wants to explore. But if it tells me don't question, I'm like, what? Why?
Right.
Why aren't you up for the challenge?
It's a big red flag. If any belief system is scared of being questioned, that means that deep under all of it, there's some flaws, contradictions, that they're afraid of you finding.
Yeah.
And the perfect belief system, question it all day long. Go ahead and question me about whatever I'm saying. That's what I say to people on the podcast. Question me, question this, be open about questioning it. If you have parents or ministers or priests in your life saying you can't question this, that's a red flag right there, that there's something wrong. And the beauty of the spiritual journey is questioning, because in that process we learn so much more about the system of thought and ourselves. It's amazing. So I resonate and relate to you, because I had that too. I've even had that when I was a kid with my parents, but even later with with girlfriends I'd have. You can't question this. Clearly there's something wrong with you if you're questioning this, that was always like, immediately I knew something was wrong. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really want to break it down simplistically, whatever it is that fashioned us, created us, whatever that is, gave us curiosity. So what kind of a horrible joke would it be, for us to be curious with our own mind and then told that we were wrong for utilizing the gift that was given to us, so
there's this fear that it's like a sin,
right,
to question. And of course it wouldn't be, because then we would just be slaves to this idea. So but going back to the book, so I love that, and I think a lot of people listening will relate to your journey. But you're telling about you're using a day as a sort of framework for this new book. And I didn't quite get it until, as it started making sense, I started relating the spiritual journey to a day, and it's very simple and powerful. It's just so crazy how the world reflects itself in large things to smaller things to smaller things.
Yeah.
So when I'm waking up in the morning, it's a lot like me awakening in the spiritual.
Yes.
And so I wanted to, what inspired you to craft this understanding of the spiritual journey around a single day and how it works?
Yeah, I think that's where, so I decided to go back to my father's, my father being a Navajo, and I went to his ancestors in the spirit realm, whatever you want to call it, in my own DNA memory. And I began to pull up wisdom and information that is very tangible. And so when when you look at, and I do a lot of comparative religions and a lot of, mental gymnastics within the book, but when you look at it, there is a macro and a micro patterning to the way that we think. So I talk a lot about like the 4 bodies of existence, which I break down to be physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And what I like to do is I like to talk about them as bodies, because it gives the connotation that each of them need to be fed. Each of them need to have some rest. Each of them need to have, exercise. And when I start looking at that in that model, I start realizing that a spiritual awakening is like the morning, just like the body goes through. And the enlightenment is like sitting in the noontime when all the light is right there. Your body understands what that is, and that gives a deeper intellect, a body intellect, so then it can explain to your mind and your emotions and your spirituality what's going on. Well, it's much like noontime. And then being is much like the evening when you're just like, oh, I had a long day's work, you kick up your feet, you sit down, and you're just being. And then in the nighttime, you're becoming, once again, you're resting. And it's just like the nighttime. When we are in our becoming, it's like quiet and dark. We don't know what's going to happen, And then beyond is the new day. And we all bodily, in our physical form, understand what that looks like. But now if we rely on the physical form to help that explain to the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies what they are going through when they find another awakening or another questioning, it kind of embodies it so that we're not so far out here that we don't know how to be here,
What I loved about it in each chapter, unexpected from your other book, and it goes along with my own path. You use the tarot, but not in the way people use the tarot to predict the future. You're using it as a sort of spiritual guide. The images awaken some sort of understanding within and help us to relate to almost like states of along the spiritual path. Am I right in
Yes.
in getting that?
Yes.
And that is the big wow moment of understanding the tarot. It was passed on like a spiritual technology from long ago as a way of transmuting complicated but simple ideas about the spiritual path. So you have different images from the tarot that you relate to the morning, the awakening, to enlightenment, And I love that, and I find myself going back and looking at the tarot and just getting so much more from it on a visceral and spiritual level when you relate it in that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, you nailed it. You picked up exactly what I was throwing down.
Right.
It's a beautiful, like, it's like the tarot, when you sit there with the major arcana and you look at the patterning that it gives, and obviously there might be a little things that are different within different decks and all of this type of thing and different interpretations. So I just go straight with the Rider-Waite deck. But I love the journey around. You can look at your own major arcana in your own decks and kind of see this same story that's being led out, whether the story is the morning, the noon, the evening, the night, and the tomorrow. Also the story of the creation, the flood, the savior or hero, and the end of time, and the idea of what's beyond that, and how that all flows in. And quite frankly, I was just inspired. It just made sense to me.
Yeah.
I've never seen that, but that's how my mind wrapped around it.
It's an amazing coincidence because I read the Law of One a lot, and the Law of One is sort of a channeled from an entity claiming to be from Venus from billions of years ago, and they claim to help in the creation of the tarot, and they have a mind, body, spirit complex, breaking the bodies just like you do, and then they have they go over the archetypes in the tarot in exactly the way, and each of the arcana are also related to the mind, the body, and the spirit. The tarot cards go into depth within each of those bodies, as you're explaining. I found that to be an amazing coincidence that you kind of discovered that at the same time.
More of that, just to give you a little bit more of how it feels from a medicine, from my perspective, from my Navajo perspective. So when the white man or the white English speaker talks, it reveals how they think and their patterning. Right. And when a Navajo talks, it reveals how they think and their patterning. And there are differences, and that's very, very true with a lot of different languages. Right. So we speak in the language that we think. So I think I write about that in the book. Nevertheless, what I want to say is that to the English speaker, to the English thinker, the word psyche is individualized. Like, I have an individual psyche, you have an individual psyche, everybody has a different one. And when it's out of balance or stressed, we go see a psychologist, a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, a psychic, whatever. But there's a difference between that concept and the concept, I think it's even in Hebrew, but in the Navajo way, they see the psyche as this collective thing that we are flowing within, as though it is what is surrounding us. And we are like fish swimming in a collective psyche. And so that's how I hear it when you say the Law of One, and I got to figure that out, because I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm saying. I must have picked that up from the psyche, Right.
Yeah, it's a same exact concept. I love that image of us swimming through an ocean of a consciousness that is all one. Yeah. I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we move from awakening, and you kind of talk about that. And then we move to the noonday enlightenment. And so differentiate that from awakening for me a little bit. So I just want to go through these 5 things just to break it down a little bit more. Sure. And enlightenment is also a phase in our life and a phase in our spiritual journey. And you also try to give personal stories. Yeah. Enlightenment is not necessarily learning this absolute truth that we suddenly discover. It's a process and something. Explain what you were trying to get at with that.
Sure. Yeah. So what I do is, like, the morning and awakening, I think of that as asking a question. Like, you wake up and all of a sudden you have a thought. you have a question, you have an idea, something was an aha moment. And what those usually lead to is like, but wait, what about this? But wait, what about? So the awakening is kind of like asking questions, or your mind or your spirit is starting to move. Enlightenment would then be like gaining answers to those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that period of time when the answers start to flow and the answers start to come.
Yeah.
And then we move to becoming. That the being is the third step, right?
Yeah.
So that's after we've already got the answers and we're starting to assimilate those answers into our lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And we start acting upon those answers. So then it's not just, cerebral or like emotional or spiritual. It's when we actually ask the question, get the answer, and then the being is how we apply that answer to our actual day-to-day activity or lifestyle, or what you do, how you are being in the world. So yeah, that's that flow. That's step 3.
Beautiful. And then you move into becoming, where you're in the process of assimilating the answers and just being, and then you're becoming. Correct? That's the 4th step.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like, I mean, I don't look at enlightenment, awakening as like a straight line that goes up. I look at it more like a spiral, that we keep going around the same process of awakening, enlightening, being, and then you're going to become something again, which is another awakening. And so it's like, oh, what's beyond all this? So we keep, and that's why sometimes our people are like, oh my God, I thought I already solved the answer to this. It's like an onion, and they keep pulling things back. It's like, how come I keep having this problem? I already thought I resolved my childhood issues or whatever it is. And it's just like, oh, that's because it's a spiral. We keep revisiting certain themes in order to establish a higher understanding around what that is, and a collective understanding, as well as an individualized personal understanding. So awakening asks the question. Enlightenment is when you get the answer. The being is how you are actually taking action. And then the nighttime, the becoming, is when you realize that that cycle is over, and it is a circle. It will repeat. That's what the Mother Earth shows us. Everything flows in circles. So that time of nighttime is a time to rest and assimilate, because you're going to wake up again. And that's when the world or the divine or the consciousness responds and brings to you the manifestations of what it is that you became, and then takes you to the next level, which is the next morning, because there's always something beyond that.
And the beauty of this is a lot of times in discussions of the spiritual journey and consciousness, there's this implication, there's an end. And once you get to the end, it's all done. This is a constant evolution and a process that you just expect it's going to be ongoing and forever in the way that you describe it, right?
Yeah. And that's what I think opens the mind, right? When, if you look at, and I do a lot of comparative religions, and all of them, not all of them, but most major religions will have an end day, the end of time, the revelation, the Ragnarok, if you are a Norse follower, the something. And then we all think that, oh, from there, we go to heaven or hell, or we cease to exist. But what if you were to understand that we start all over again? What? You'd have to start asking questions, right? You would have to start asking what? You'd have to start asking questions, because I was raised in a very linear thinking, straight line thinking about this is the process. And by the way, Jesus is coming tomorrow, so you better put your things straight. That was so ingrained in my childhood and my childlike mind that I literally used it as an excuse not to do my homework. Why do your homework? Jesus is coming tomorrow.
So true.
Yeah. And so that's how ingrained and embodied I had that. And so, but if you realize, wait a second, there's something more, that's the whole concept. There's something more. There's something more. And I think that like the wise people of the world realize that they don't know any very much at all, because they realize the one simple truth of there is always something more.
Mhm.
And that right sizes us. And then we stop feeling like we need to have all the answers to everything, because there's always something more.
So I was just loved your book on talking about connecting to nature and symbology of everything. I've had this experience, especially recently, and I felt like it was a collective thing, but and it was with other people I know. Like I've really focused. I find myself gardening. I find myself outside going on hikes and different beautiful places all the time. I find myself connected to animals. They come up to me all the time. Birds, raccoons feel like they have a connection to me all the time in a way that's never happened in my life. And I started noticing the more and more I got to meditate outside now. I don't meditate inside. I have to meditate outside, feel the wind, feel the elements. It's almost like a sort of circle has formed around like the little house where I'm at.
Yes.
And it's like paradise. Like the whole world could be ending, but
Yes.
Earth is like created a little vortex right where I'm at. And it's like the Garden of Eden. Like the animals come. It's like I'm in
Yes.
paradise, and I'm in a communication with the mother. She's sending. Oh, you got to feed these new birds. You got to leave some peanuts for the squirrel, right?
Mhm.
I felt like that. Like there was this connection I had. I was there now a conduit
Yeah.
in this little tiny little area for what the Earth was trying to do. Am I crazy? Is this something that I've seen as a phenomenon with other friends of mine
Yeah.
that are starting to meditate too? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh, big time. Absolutely 100%. I live in
Yeah.
my own little Garden of Eden bubble.
Right.
Absolutely. To the extent that I've grid my property with certain stones, basically placing
Mhm.
certain stones all the way around the parameter. And this is my little my little bubble, you
Yeah.
know. And the beauty around that is that the more that we become aware of our connectivity with the natural world, aka we are the natural world, our bodies are the natural world, the more that we recognize that the natural world, we're not just like went to a movie to watch the natural world as we sit in our backyard and we
Right.
just watch. We actually become a part of it. And the thinking that starts changing is like, that bird that I saw probably saw me first. It knows I'm here, you know, or
Mhm.
I touch a tree and maybe it's my warmth or whatever, on whatever level, you know, the tree knows that I'm touching it. The tree knows that I'm touching it.
Mhm.
However that consciousness goes. And you know, for people who are coming into that type of an exploration and thing, I would say pick up books on the concept of animism, because animism is a concept that everything has a soul, and or what I like to say is everything has a consciousness. And when we begin to realize, oh, you mean this isn't just, you know, a place that was set up, you know, that I can watch for fun or have a picnic in, but when you realize, oh my God, I'm within this whole thing, it like heals the body, the soul, it reconnects, it realigns. I'm sure it does so many different things,
Yeah.
but yeah, but it's alive.
So yeah, I had an episode on the podcast that I kind of talked about an experience I had where all the trees started talking to me. And since that has happened, they haven't stopped. You know,
Yeah,
sometimes I can kind of block them out. And
yeah,
sometimes I still question, am I sane? Is this just my wild imagination? You know, and I've even had people I respect saying, Brian, the trees are not talking to you. But I swear these trees are talking to me. And it's a lot of times they don't have anything to say. Or they're just there. There's a presence, and the trees all have their own personalities. It's not
yeah,
like one tree talks the same as the others. They're
right.
all different, and they
Yes.
all have their opinions. And I'll you know, I'll learn a whole history about a tree when I'm hanging out with it. It'll tell me what's going on. Have you encountered this phenomenon?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, your friends will think that they'd say the same thing to me, but this is how I will explain scientifically to give a little bit more logic to the doubting minds that don't understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So in one of my communications classes in my undergrad, we had to read a book called Louder Than Words, written by Alton Barber. And in this book, he breaks it down and he says 7% of conversation is in word, which means 93% of how we are communicating with each other is body language, is like facial expression and tone and all of that. And then what we're doing is we are interpreting all of that into a language that our mind recognizes. So of course, if only 7% of communication is in word, 93%, that tree is talking to you, because it does all of those things when the wind goes through it. And I get both. Like sometimes the tree doesn't speak English, it just speaks volumes. But sometimes like I'll start working with a tree and all of a sudden this old voice comes up and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm like, what? Huh?
Right,
Wasn't
yeah.
expecting that. And so what I would say about that, and is that my imagination or not? Truth is, who is driving your imagination?
Right, exactly. It's a great question.
Yeah.
But I have found when I listen to the trees, they have wisdom.
Yes, they
I
do.
can learn great things. And I've encountered many trees I felt like had been souls that had not been trees before and had chosen to be in this state because they wanted to be in a state of stillness, because it allowed them to be closer to the creator. And it was like, it's like a spa, or like they're there for this short period of time. And I just love that. I just love that. And so when this happens to you, when it's not just the trees and it's the rocks and everything, the whole world becomes just this cacophony of different voices, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, I love, just to back up 1 second, I love what you said about a soul choosing to be a tree out of the stillness of it. And where my mind goes with that is, one day in our life is 1 year to a tree. It wakes up in the springtime. In the summer, it grows like our noontime. In the fall, it starts falling asleep just like our evening time. And in the winter, it goes to sleep. So it's like an extended stillness time.
That was the
Absolutely.
big revelation, is that they have a different perception of linear time.
Yes.
In reality, everything's moving like much faster. So
Yes.
the wiser older trees kind of know that, and they can kind of adjust their rate of time. But many of them, people are not able to understand what's going on because they're just experiencing time on a different level.
I absolutely agree 100%. And I think that when the world begins to wake up and we start dialoguing with it, it tells us so many wonderful things. In fact, it is my eldest and dearest teacher. And what I mean by that is, if there is a concept, whether it's man-made or whatever, a concept that comes into my mind, or a thought or an idea, I bump it up against the natural world to find out if it's true or not. So what I'm saying is, like, the human race is the only organism or species that I have found on Mother Earth that has thoughts or ideas that say, I am not good enough, I do not belong, I'm wrong,
Right.
I'm sinful. No other organism does that. My cat sure doesn't do that,
No.
And so when you get these messages or these narratives that maybe society or whatever tells you, bump it up against the natural world and be like, oh, you know what? That doesn't exist. I can't find another organism that is ashamed of being itself into its own totality. So why am I doing that?
Another thing that that you write about in your books is the elements, fire, wind, water, air, and its relationship in the natural world. Have you ever had any experiences where you were in communication with the elements? I've had times around the fire, it felt like the fire was alive.
Yes.
And that all the fire is alive, wherever it's all like one being.
Yes.
Even if it's snuffed out, it's just in that moment when, if you really focus on the fire, it's a living element that it has power and can communicate. There are beings within it. What is your impression of that?
100%. I remember gathering around a fire, doing some sort of a spiritual ritual or whatnot. And then I remember falling in love with my husband in front of a fire or candlelit dinner. And then I remember going out into the backyard and grilling up, whatever on the grill again with the fire. And I thought to myself, the fire hears all that we say. The fire hears our relations with each other. And it's this, to me, it has ears, it has a spirit. I love like snapping shots, like with my phone and seeing the fire drakes and the dragons and the entities and how it dances. It to me, it is very much has a soul that is expressed throughout history, that we continue as a people to gather around. And the same thing with water. I mean, talk about the flood stories and the different forms that water will take. Like, sometimes it can be just a spring, and then sometimes it's like mucky, and then sometimes it's like this ocean, but it's all one thing, and it can take different forms depending on the environment. Meaning, like, if it's warm, the water flows. If it's cold, the water freezes. So what is all this talk? What I'm saying is, what if your emotions were like water and you are in a relationship that is warm and your emotions flow? What if your emotions are like water and you are in a relation where it is very cold and you turn to ice? It's very natural. So the application of the elemental spirits are very much alive within my world. Within, earth is the same, fire, water, spirit, all of it. Wind, oh my goodness, wind. I used to play with the wind when I was a little girl. Like, I would conjure it, and then I'd sing, and then all of a sudden it'd blow, and then I'd stop. It like played with me, and maybe that was my imagination. But then I grew up and I went to go visit my Aunt Alice, a high priestess of the Peyote Way down on the reservation, very traditional medicine. And she told me, one day I was a little girl and I was standing outside, and the wind told me to go in this direction. It blew me in a direction. So I listened to it and I followed it, and then it stopped. So I stopped and I looked underneath, and there was a peyote, and the peyote taught me its medicine.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing. So I've had this situation several times when I'm really in tune, when I feel like I'm flowing, I'm in tune, I'm connected to the creator. When the wind outside is reflecting my feelings.
Yes.
I might be worried or nervous. Whoosh, I can hear it, and I calm down a little bit. I force myself to relax, and the wind calms down outside. Yes. And obviously I'm seeing that synchronicity, but I feel like I'm connected to that wind in that moment, right?
Absolutely. 100%. So the way that I explain, or the way that I think about that is, the more that you connect within that little bubble, the more the whole bubble reflects and you reflect it.
Right.
And so another thing that I do beyond authorship and teaching and public speaking is I do offer one-on-one sessions. And prior to a one-on-one session, I will set sacred space. And what I do is I'm just like, I draw a circle around this space and time, declare it sacred space, sacred time. I set my ego to the outside, and may I be a clear conduit for you and for the divine as it reveals itself to you, to provide you with whatever information will best, empower you or help you at this moment, and then game on. So once the agreement that I have with spirit is that once I do that, I am in sacred space and sacred time. And in my agreement with the divine, that means anything that I think, anything that catches my eye, any noise that comes in is a message regarding that individual. So like I'll be sitting there, I set sacred space and I start feeling like I'm getting pushed or pushed or pushed. And sometimes I just dismiss it, but it comes back. And if it comes back 3 times, I'm like, I feel like I'm getting pushed out of the nest. And the individual will break down, say, my mom and dad are kicking me out of the house. I got to go find my own house, or,
Right.
or I'll smell roses. And I'm like, Rose, how did you know my daughter's middle name? So I trust
Right.
I
Yeah.
trust it all. So it's almost, to me, what you're saying, the way I understand it is that you are setting up such a unique sacred space and you're beginning to get some sort of an agreement with that space, the divine, whatever you call it, the consciousness. And now it's like, oh, this will be fun. Let's talk to him. Let's sing with him. Let's reflect him. Let's let him know. I mean, it's kind of like the days that you're the most sad, all of a sudden it rains and it's just
That's
like,
what I was going to say. I mean, it'll be
yeah,
dark and cloudy and rainy when I wake
yeah,
up and kind of sad.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Why are weekends and Saturdays always beautiful and sunny,
Right. I know, exactly. I love it. But yeah, that relationship, the just a side note, the more that we pay attention to anything, the more that it changes and grows. It's like in quantum physics, it would be like the observer effect. When you observe something, it changes because it knows it's being observed. And in the healthcare and science community, I think it's called like the Hawthorne effect, where if they're going to do a study to study like lotion or something like that, they do have a group that says, just because we're starting to pay attention and take pictures and put lotion on, the skin is going to change just because of that, even if it's placebo. So when we do pay attention to, like, the more you pay attention to your connection, the more it like starts just a whole symphony around.
Well, and another amazing thing in my connection with nature that is the infinite variety of shapes and forms.
Yeah.
You walk through the forest or you walk just anywhere, and I'm still blown away, how many different plants and flowers and animals I'm not even aware of. They're constantly being shown to me, all these alternating and beautiful shapes. And that state of becoming aware of
Yeah.
this infinite variety of shapes and forms is empowering and powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, if one is drawn to the study of sacred geometry, that is a beautiful way to go to look at the natural world and see all of the natural shapes and things. I have a funny story. So my husband studies and follows more of the Norse tradition, the Northern European with Odin and Thor.
Right.
And they have the runes. And so when I'm with him, I talk runic, I relate to him. And so one time we went up to the mountains, and it was a sunny day, and we started going up this trail, and I kept seeing this Hagalaz rune, which is it looks like an H, but I just kept seeing it like within the tree branches or within, a crack. I'm like, I keep seeing Hagalaz. I keep seeing Hagalaz. And I'm like, I'm getting this feeling like we should go. And he's like, okay, because, I'm the weirdo in the family. So, we'll go along with what Granddaughter Crow says. So we get in the car. Hagalaz, one of the direct interpretations of Hagalaz is hail, like H-A-I, well, like with a hailstorm. We got stuck. We made it to the car or the truck just in time, and a big hailstorm hit. It was,
wow.
yeah. So it was like the natural world had a clue that I would be able to interpret it if it provided it in that form. And so it's almost like we build our own psychic dictionary, so that the energy goes, oh, I know that if I show you a butterfly, you'll think of your dad. I know that if I show you this symbol, you'll think about sacred geometry. I know that if I show you Hagalaz, you'll get in the car and get off this mountain because it's about ready to hail.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, your most recent book and the past one obviously have inspired you in a number of different ways. What is the main message that you want it to get out to others that read the book?
Yeah. I would say, please question,
Mhm.
approach life with curiosity. Recognize that, you know, approaching life with curiosity, not falling into the assumption that we know everything, and in fact, I guess we kind of do. If we sit in stillness, all of the consciousness comes in, but in the human form, we got to kind of break it down, but always approach life with curiosity, because if we as a collective don't do that, we are hurting a lot of people and ostracizing a lot of people and leaving a lot of people on the sideline that could be our next greatest leaders. But we leave them behind because our belief system says XYZ and they are not following within our personal belief system. And so to recognize that, if you as a reader were ostracized because of who you were and what people believed and how they couldn't accept you because of their belief system, this book is for you. I got your back. And we can all move forward as a collective whole if we remember that. Let's ask questions and be curious and see what lies beyond. There's so much more,
Yeah. I always
Mhm.
like to ask this question of everybody that I talk to. It feels like we're going through a global awakening, a change in our consciousness. And you're on the forefront of that. You're writing about it, you're talking to people about it. What is your impression as to what is happening in the world? And what it may be a spiral, but what is it we're moving into? What is the
Mhm.
level of consciousness that we're moving into?
Yeah. So the way that I would, especially under the pandemic, political change, global change, economic change, lots of change. It's like we're getting, it's like if you have a beautiful dream, you're like sleeping literally, and you are having this great dream, you don't want to wake up. You just don't want to wake up. But if you have a nightmare, you wake up. You try your damnedest to wake up. My key is when I have a nightmare, I hold my breath and it gets me straight out of there. So we're going through like kind of an awakening based on being somewhat in a bad dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Getting a little startled. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm watching the news a lot more
Mhm.
than I ever have before. I'm paying attention. Things are a lot more real. And so in that, it's like we had to wake up. And spirit and the earth and the consciousness was like, if we keep you guys peacefully asleep, you ain't gonna wake up. Sorry, guys. Let's do the tower card in the tarot. Let's break it down. Let's start asking questions. And so then the next card in the tarot is the star card, which is all about enlightenment. It's aligned with Aquarius energy of humanitarianism and consciousness. So it's kind of like a hard, heavy wake up call to wake us all up and then to allow a new version of this consciousness to come in. And it is so large that it reveals itself to us individually in different ways. And so it's kind of like, I think that everybody has like a little combination based on their lived experience, their DNA, memory, all of that kind of stuff. So then the divine or this consciousness will reveal itself to you in the way that you most understand it. And it reveals itself to me in the way that I most understand it. And what's fun is to sit around and compare with each other what's going on. But I feel this enlightenment. I feel enlightenment coming, and I feel more collective consciousness, more higher consciousness state, however you see. And I mean, I can fly to the stars and back with you. I can go through whatever. That's why I like to appear to individuals based on what they believe in, so I can speak their language, because I know
Mhm.
whatever this vibration is, it's so much bigger than one language. So yeah, an awakening and enlightenment, much to the star card. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, pick up the book, pick up a tarot deck, go to the star card and just stare at it, step into it, use your imagination, look around, that's where we're headed.
Wonderful. Something I talk a lot about on my podcast is the unique relationship between our consciousness and the world around us, and our ability to create our reality. Certain, I know one of the great things about reading your books is that you're fascinated by different belief systems, and you're open to accepting contradictory belief systems. It's possible, but and I find that as a tenet in different belief systems, how much they believe in the power of creation. Some not so much, some very much so. Experientially, it feels like we're becoming more and more manifestors, at least in my own. That's the only way I can really evaluate it. What is your feeling, and what have you learned as a medicine woman in learning to create realities?
That, I mean, Brian, we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful concept. What I would say is that absolutely there's more and more energy and understanding about how we can manifest, how we do manifest. And what I would say is, this is why it's such a big concept that I'm trying to boil it down to just pure English words. The whole enlightenment and manifestation concepts, and how we can talk about those through the mental realm and through our spiritual awakenings, and how, we connect with all of this, and our emotions connecting with all of it. That's why it's so important to get into the natural world and embody what that is, and understand with your body what mourning feels like and its assimilation, so that it actually comes manifest. So many people stop with the idea or the emotion, that we need to embody what that actually feels like from a sensational point of view, and literally embody it. And then don't limit it. Oh my God, we're in a dialogue with whatever it is. And so, like I say, oh, this will be great, I'm going to write this book, and maybe somebody will read it. Well, I hand it over to the divine and the collective conscious, or the unconscious, or whatever this thing is, and all of a sudden it creates on its own. As a medicine person, I would say, keep your mind, watch your thoughts, keep your mind in a curious, gratitude, curious position. Because when I am not curious, I don't see what's right in front of me, and all the answers could be right in front of me, but I didn't pose the question, so I don't recognize the answer. I could talk about this for days, but I would just say, the one thing I would say is absolutely the idea that we have something to do, that the creator isn't something that is like a parent, like a parental figure where we have to ask permission for everything. It's becoming a partner. And we create with it, and it creates with and through us. And step one, be curious and embody it. Be curious and embody it. When our mind starts looking for the beauty and the treasures and the miracles, your mind starts finding those. And then it starts building, and then your creation becomes this beautiful thing. Really quickly, for those of us who have watched Ghostbusters, where they're like, clear your mind, because whatever you think will be the monster. That is so true.
It's true. Yeah,
it is true. So clear your mind and be curious, and look for the beauty in the world, and you will find it. And the momentum just begins. And we absolutely are creators. Absolutely, 100%.
Now, as a medium and medicine woman, I would like to get your perspective on the afterlife, on past lives and future lives. How do you think it works? What is your impression? Because there's so many, and I love to hear them all, and I believe them all, right?
No, so do I. It's so funny.
There's truth in all of them, right?
There is truth in all of them. And the story of that our consciousness individually can understand is where we're at within that perspective. So when I sit with somebody and I'm starting to hear from those on the other side, or I'm starting to hear or see their past life, I ask them, where do you land? Have you ever explored, reincarnation or the afterlife? And then I stay within their parameters because I'm not here to spook anybody. So then I'll just describe it in a different way. I'll talk about potential DNA memory or potential soul memory, that maybe came through the bloodline, however they understand it. I think that there are so many ways. It's like looking through, like, what do you call those? That a diamond. And you see all of these little facets, whatever works for the person. For me, I feel personally, and I don't want anybody to pick up my belief system without questioning it, right? Always question.
Exactly.
So for me, I feel like I've been around the block a handful of times. And that I actually, Brian, it's so weird that there came a time in my life that I was like, okay, I'm done. I finished all my karma. I'm all ready to go. Why aren't I dead? My spirit and my mind and my emotions felt like this. I'm like, what am I still doing here? What am I still doing here? And I was just like, I've never heard anybody say that before. And I'm like, maybe I just find it easier to be in human form and to get the message out instead of trying to, be a spirit and haunt somebody to have them write the book. It's just easier.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But I believe that all is energy. Einstein says that. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It comes up in different forms. It constantly exists, reinvents, moves, morphs. And however that makes sense to you, that is what I would say. For me, a lot of different things make sense. A lot of different things. And I love hearing more because I'm like, ooh, that makes sense too. Ooh, that makes sense too. So,
well, with the concept of a multiverse, you can have multiple different afterlives. And one thing that really resonates with me is that, at least initially when we die, we kind of go to an afterlife that we've created, because that's what, if it's hell that you're in, it's because that's what you're expecting. And you just kind of go to this. Eventually we awaken, we go through another day in the afterlife, just like you described in your book. But initially everything's going to be what we created. And so initially we're like, see, I was right. Yep. Everything is exactly as I imagined it, right? Because that's the only way we can comfortably kind of assess and understand what's going on, right?
I believe that. Exactly. It's like, I don't believe in the pearly gates and streets of golds and mansions like I did when I was little, but my parents do. And I bet they're going to go there.
They're going to see the pearly gates. They're going to see the streets for a while. Until they awaken.
Yes.
Just like you're talking about. And they go through the same spiral.
Yeah.
Even in the afterlife. I think it's a constant progress. And then they can choose, okay, should I go back and live another life, or should I go to this other planet? What is your concept of planets? When we look out and when you look out in the universe, I'm at least 20 times a day, I just love to ponder the planets and the infinite number of solar systems and galaxies. And so, is each solar system have another experiment like this one? I mean, what is your concept and belief as a medicine woman and what you've seen in the afterlife?
What I would say is all of it. If you can imagine it, it's going on someplace. And it might all be simultaneously going on. And when I look out into the stars and the heavens and everything, it's so beautiful. And I realize that I'm in this lived experience, but then I go to sleep and I dream about being on a planet with 2 moons. And it is so crystal clear that I'm like, how did I imagine that? Or I swim with a whale. Or last night when I was dreaming, I had a raven just come up and it was just following me around and it wanted me to just pet it. It's just like, I've never really actually done that in this dimensional lived experience, but somehow I have these memories. So I'm all about, if there is something that you are perceiving on one level or another, it exists, even if it's just in your mind, but what put it there? So I'm a kid. I'm a kid. I'm just like, holy crap, in fact, I had a dream one time that I met myself in a parallel universe. I went out to coffee with her And she was in the version that the family didn't kick her out. And she
Right.
was going shopping with her sister. And I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, you look so gracious. And I love the color of your shirt. And she goes, I love this color blue. And I woke up and I'm like, I love that color blue. And then I thought to myself, maybe that is my line. This certain color is what connects all of my existence. So I just have those
Right. No, I love that. So
fun thoughts.
what your concept of dreams, it might be us experiencing a parallel reality. It could be symbolic. How do you treat your dreams spiritually? Are we learning from them, or is it just journaling, or is it how what does your culture and heritage teach you about treating your dreams?
Yeah, I can't answer from a Navajo perspective, but I can answer from a Granddaughter Crow perspective. And what I would say is that there are different types of dreams. Some are you digesting your day, some of that, so I say journal about them. But the more that you ask questions before you go to sleep, the more answers come up in your dreams. Or if you've, all of that. And I think I talk about dreams and the study of dreams in my book, Belief, Being, and Beyond. And I think of dreams like they're different things. And I think that sometimes when I'm not paying attention to them, that they'll come back around and I'll keep dreaming the same thing until it feels like a deja vu. And then I catch it and I'm like, oh, this has purpose. Oh, this has purpose. But I can tell you from my lived experience that I will have a dream and sometimes it is literal. And I will write it down and it's like either a prediction or it's something that's going on the other side of the planet or whatever. Sometimes I have a dream and it is a metaphor. And the hardest part about being who we are is figuring out what we're perceiving. Is it a metaphor or is it literal?
Right.
That still trips me up, and I've been
That's
doing
my
it for
thing.
years.
I've made the mistake of thinking it was a metaphor when it wasn't, and I've made the opposite mistake. But clearly, it's never the same. It's not. We can't say dreams are this. It's
Right.
obviously a lot of different things.
Yeah, and there is a culture, a tribe, probably I think in South Africa, and maybe one of the listeners will like type it into, and let me know what it is, but that believes that the dreamland is the real one, and this is our mundane sleep.
Sure, yeah, why not?
I love it.
It's been so much fun talking to you, and I want everybody to go out and type in Granddaughter Crow on Amazon and then get all 3 of your books. They're amazing. So just thank you so much for opening up. We'll have to have you on and we can talk about this some more. Belief, Being, and Beyond is the name of the most recent book, and you can find your website at granddaughtercrow.com. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Reality Revolution.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.